It all happens fast once the World Series ends. Free agency is officially open for business, and some clarity for the Giants about their 2025 payroll after opt-out decisions were due, and we've got answers.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, been hosting this show since the beginning of the 2019 season, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there. If you have not already, please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And of course, we're talking the start of the NFL season there. And coming up on today's show, it's the start of the MLB offseason, as we are more than 5 days after the end of the World Series, meaning open for business. You know, technically speaking, you could sign a player, a free agent right now. And, you know, typically that doesn't happen for, you know, it takes a while. It takes till the end of the month-ish until things start to break open a little bit, and then into the winter meetings, which are in more, you know, early to mid-December this year, normally early December. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that we got some clarity, not just some. We got total clarity on these decisions that were not decided yet, and it shapes the Giants' 2025 payroll, and it will inform us as to what they can do, being realistic about 2025 payroll. How much do they have to spend on free agents this offseason is basically the answer that we can come to by revealing these decisions. So the decisions that needed to be made were pertaining to Blake Snell, who had an opt-out of 1 year and like $31 million. Robbie Ray, who could choose to opt in or opt out of 2 years and $50 million remaining on his deal. You had Wilmer Flores, who had a $3.5 million player option, and if he declined it, it would become an $8.5 million club option. And so those decisions were made. They had to be made by, I think it was Sunday. And it was clear and obvious that Blake Snell was going to opt out after the second half that he put together. It was a fantastic second half. I know he didn't, you know, pitch as many innings as he would have liked, as the Giants would have liked, but he ended up with a 3.12 ERA, a 2.54 expected ERA, strikeout rate of 34.7% on the season, fielding independent pitching of 2.43, just awesome kind of numbers. But in only 104 innings, he did miss about a month twice with the same groin injury. So anyway, the performance was good enough. No hitter, second half just utter dominance, that it was an easy decision to opt out. So that on the downside, Blake Snell is a free agent. On the, I guess, plus side, you know, it's $30 million coming off the books that otherwise would have been committed, although you'd be happy to have that committed to Blake Snell, I'm sure. But nonetheless, it's $30 million off the books for 2025. And for Robbie Ray, this was, to me, like definitely strong leaning opt out, given that he just, I think it was a big deal that he ended up missing a lot of time down the stretch with a hamstring injury. It's not like an elbow injury. It's not something super scary. It's just a hamstring injury. So he only made 7 starts with the Giants in 2024. And so he ends up opting in. He doesn't, better said, he doesn't opt out of 2 years and $50 million. So when the Giants took Robbie Ray's contract on, last offseason when they traded for him, it was always likely in my mind and in a lot of people's minds that this was someone who was going to be here for 3 years, not just the 1 year and then opt out. And keep in mind, the way they got Robbie Ray was they traded Mitch Haniger and Anthony DeSclafani to the Seattle Mariners. And so those were, Anthony DeSclafani did not pitch last year. He ended up being hurt, getting hurt, and missing the entire season. And Mitch Haniger went on to have basically an identical type season to the one he had in his first year in San Francisco, which is to say a bad one. And so Haniger also had an opt-in, or I should just call it, he had a player option for 2025, and it was no surprise coming off 2 consecutive down years that he opted in to that deal at, I think, 17 point something $1 million. And so don't think, I don't really think any argument against, okay, it's 15.5 million that Haniger opts into. I'd much rather have Robbie Ray next year than Mitch Haniger. I think Robbie Ray has the upside to get back to his old self. Even just looking at early steamer projections for Robbie Ray, they've got him with a 3.98 ERA, 3.95 fielding independent pitching, in 160 innings, putting up about 2 wins above replacement. So that's solid production. And Robbie Ray, he's a former Cy Young Award winner, and he'll be 2 years removed from Tommy John. He is 33. He just turned 33 about a month ago. But nevertheless, I mean, just to have a piece like this in your rotation, and it wasn't just like a free agent signing. You have to factor in last year and this upcoming year. Last year, DeSclafani and Haniger were not paid because they took on Robbie Ray. And this upcoming year, it's Robbie Ray for $25 million versus 15. So it's really like, a $10 million deal for Robbie Ray from an accounting perspective, because the Giants already owed that money to Mitch Haniger. So anyway, Robbie Ray is back. I think that's a good thing. It's just a 2-year, $50 million deal now, so that's guaranteed. There's no opt-out at the end of this season. It was just he had this one chance after 2024 to opt out. He didn't, so he's here for 2 more years at $25 million a year. So that's good to have that player locked up, and it's good to have that, to know that money is on your books for the next 2 seasons. So Wilmer Flores, I hope this is not made, that a big deal is not made of the Wilmer Flores contract. It's $3.5 million. This is a minuscule amount of money from a baseball perspective. He had a down year. There's no doubt about it. He was injured. It was the first down year he had in San Francisco. Before that, he was remarkably consistent, always above average offensively, never above average defensively or on the bases, but still a valuable player. Like, I think if you think Wilmer Flores hasn't been a valuable player to the Giants every year except last year, you'd be fooling yourself, or you weren't paying attention or something. But he is 33. I think in a way it's good for the Giants that he had a down year, because otherwise he'd probably opt out of that $3.5 million player option, and then you'd have to make a tougher decision on that $8.5 million club option. So to get Wilmer Flores back, when you've got Bryce Eldridge coming, I think, you look at Lamont Wade Jr. and Wilmer Flores as, to me, a solid platoon. And yes, they're still probably going to platoon. It's obviously there's a chance they don't, and maybe they go sign a first baseman, but then you're kind of blocking Bryce Eldridge. Whereas Flores and Wade could play the bench if Bryce Eldridge comes up and becomes a monster. And so to have Flores for a low cost of $3.5 million, I mean, it's a super reasonable deal for a guy who, when healthy, was a very solid player for 4 seasons in San Francisco. He was their best offensive player just in 2023. And so I don't want to put too much weight into an injury-plagued 2024 for Flores. So he's back. It's $3.5 million, even if they cut ties like that. It's just not a lot of money in baseball terms. Just to give you reference, Fangraphs estimates what a player's worth is per season. And in 2020 was a partial season, so we're not going to count that. But they valued his production at $15 million in 2021, $10.4 million in 2022, and $18.4 million in 2023. Now, last year, negative $5.3 million. Like I said, it wasn't a good year. But if he can be anything like the first, even in 2020, even though it was a 60-game season, $8.5 million of worth, and we're talking $3.5 million is what they're paying him going into 2025. And so I don't want to hear too much moaning and groaning about that. I think it's not a big deal one way or the other. And best case scenario, he goes back to being a really solid player and a nice stopgap while they wait for Bryce Eldridge. So coming up in just a minute, defense, Gold Gloves. Giants had 3 candidates. We got some results. We'll get into it in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode of Locked on Giants is brought to you in part by Hims. Your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have the time to go to a doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. All right, as promised, defense. This has been a hot topic in Giants land for several years. And this year, quietly, the Giants had a couple of elite defenders on their team, and they had 3 Gold Glove finalists in Patrick Bailey at the catcher position, Matt Chapman at third base, and Mike Yastrzemski in right field. And so I did do an episode a while ago when it was announced that these 3 were finalists, making the case that I thought Bailey and Chapman really ought to win this award. And I said that Yastrzemski probably shouldn't. And I thought the player who should probably was Sal Frelick. And I believe Sal Frelick is the one who ended up winning. And so Giants sent out a press release after it was announced that both Patrick Bailey and Matt Chapman did indeed win the Gold Glove Award at their respective positions in the National League. So a huge accomplishment. It's actually on the Zoom call when they met with the media after this was announced. But I'm just going to read you the press release the Giants sent out. Giants said, San Francisco Giants third baseman Matt Chapman and catcher Patrick Bailey were both named winners of Rawlings Gold Glove Awards tonight at their respective positions for the National League. They are the first Giants to win the award since Brandon Crawford was the National League shortstop honoree in 2021. The last time the Giants had a pair of Gold Glove winners was 2016, when a trio of Giants in Crawford, second baseman Joe Panik, and catcher Buster Posey all won Gold Gloves. The Gold Glove is the 5th in Chapman's career and first in the National League. By the way, in his first season in the National League, they continue, also winning it in 2018, 2019, and 2021 with Oakland, as well as 2023 with Toronto. His 5 Gold Gloves at third base are tied for 8th most since they started handing out Gold Gloves in 1957. The only third basemen with more career Gold Gloves than Chapman are Brooks Robinson, who had 16, Nolan Arenado, who had 10, Mike Schmidt with 10, Scott Rowland with 8, Buddy Bell with 6, Eric Chavez with 6, and Robin Ventura with 6. Chapman is the first Giants third baseman to win the award since Matt Williams in 1994, 30 years ago. And so they continue. Chapman, 31 years old, finished with 17 defensive runs saved, according to Fangraphs, most among third basemen, and tied for fourth most in the majors, regardless of position. His 11 outs above average, which is a StatCast metric, per Baseball Savant, were tied with Milwaukee's Joey Ortiz for most among third basemen. Now getting to Bailey. Giants said Bailey, who finished his second year in the majors, is the first SF catcher to win the award since Posey in 2016. Playing most of the 2024 season as a 25-year-old, Bailey is tied for the youngest Giant to take home a Gold Glove in team history. The other Giants who were 25 when they won a Gold Glove were Panik in 2016, Williams in 1991, Bobby Bonds in 1971, and Jackie Brandt in 1959. Bailey finished the campaign with 20 defensive runs saved, which is the most by a catcher. Next closest was Seattle's Cal Raleigh with 17, and tied for second most at any position behind Milwaukee infielder Bryce Terang's 21 defensive runs saved at second base. This is where it's critical, and actually I'm going to correct something that the Giants say here. Per Baseball Savant, so again, we're getting into StatCast metrics here, which are, a computer is just kind of analyzing this stuff. It's not really, there's no human eye test in Baseball Savant metrics. Per Baseball Savant, Bailey led all catchers with 16 catcher framing runs. I think that may be runs above average. I might want to double check on that. Here's where there's a bit of it's not a typo, it's just not quite explained correctly. They say a 52.5% strike rate. So that's not, for lack of a better word, framed correctly. That's funny. That's not framed correctly as a term. It's a 52.5% strike rate on pitches in the shadow zone is technically how we should say that. And the shadow zone is, I believe it's the width of a baseball, both inside the strike zone and outside the strike zone. So if you do that all the way across the four sides of the rectangle of the strike zone, they call that the shadow zone. And so they calculate basically borderline pitches and what is your rate of called strikes. So when a pitch is not swung at and it's in that zone, what is the rate of strikes? And for Bailey, he was at 52.5, and that was the best among all catchers. So it's not just a 52.5% strike rate, which seems like I would be confused if I didn't really know about this, what that even meant. But anyway, it's the strike rate on borderline pitches, while also having a average, which they didn't include, but it's an average 1.85 second pop time to second base. And pop time, in case you're unfamiliar, is the time from the moment the ball hits the catcher's glove on a pitch to when it not actually hits the glove of the second baseman, but when it arrives at second base. It's kind of actually unclear to me exactly how they define this, but the second baseman could stand 5 feet in front of the base, and they don't want that skewing the data to say that was your pop time. It's more like it estimates exactly when the ball would arrive at second base. So his pop time was 1.85 seconds on average, which was tied for best among qualified catchers. Additionally, Bailey's 6 catcher stealing runs were tied for most among catchers with the Dodgers' Will Smith, while Bailey's 9 catchers caught stealing above average was second best to Smith's 10. So these are some advanced metrics that they're citing. I'm glad they're doing it. Back in the day, before I started podcasting, one of the reasons I started podcasting, they'd be listing fielding percentages for these guys as their qualifications. Imagine a world where catchers are evaluated by fielding percentage. It makes no sense at all. The things that they're citing are actually what's important. Framing runs, and those framing runs are based on the strike rate. So framing has the biggest impact in terms of runs versus pop times and blocking. Bailey's blocking is not that great. I think he did okay in the end. but it's the least important of the metrics for a catcher. And so if we actually look at Baseball Savant, again, StatCast, they have fielding run value. It's for all fielders. Bailey led all of baseball by 5 runs at 22. I don't know if this is runs. I think it's just, runs. It's got to be runs above average. 22 runs with his glove, like saved essentially by framing, by throwing, by blocking. So he was at plus 16 for framing, as the Giants cited in their press release, plus 6 for throwing, and 0 for blocking. And it added up to 22, and that's more than anybody in baseball. These are runs. And the next closest was Dalton Varsho with plus 17. So, almost 33% more than the next closest player. So Bailey absolutely deserved to win this award. And if we look at catcher framing, I just want to verify that, 52.5% strike rate on borderline pitches. Next closest player was at 51%. So Bailey was the best framer in baseball by quite a bit, 1.5 percentage points, and 16 framing runs. And the next closest was Cal Raleigh, I think, like the Giants said, at plus 13. And so we can also calculate things like when a steal is not always a catcher's fault. You can have the best pop time in the world, but if the pitcher is extremely slow to the plate, like that's why caught stealing percentage is not a great metric. It's just really, we want to know if you're trying to isolate the catcher's performance, it's framing, it's blocking, and then it's pop times. And because you can't help how quick the pitcher delivers the pitch or how big of a lead the pitcher lets the runner get, right? That there are certain things, and StatCast has tackled these issues and sees Bailey as the best defender in baseball, essentially. In terms of outs above average at third base, that is something I want to just quickly get to as well. Outs above average at third base, Matt Chapman was tied with Joey Ortiz with plus 11 for the league lead among qualified players. And in terms of defensive runs saved, this is where Chapman really stood out from the herd just in general. And I mean, Patrick Bailey, by the way, was tied for second among all players in defensive runs saved, but Chapman was tied for third with plus 17 defensive runs saved. And so, these two guys very, very deserving of winning this award. And it's the first time for Bailey. It's the 5th time for Chapman, like they said. So, Bailey could definitely be a candidate for a platinum glove, which is like the best defender in the whole sport. I think they do 2, one in the National League, one in the American League. Not sure. They might just do 1, period. But anyway, that's something to watch out for as well. So congratulations to these guys. And coming up in just a minute, we'll turn our attention to something I saw coming, but it seemed like it might not happen, but then it did happen. Departures in the front office. We'll explain in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode of Locked on Giants is brought to you in part by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. I'm looking at FanDuel.com right now, and the way I would do this, it seems obvious, but I would pick the most lopsided kind of, betting line and do that for $5 and try to get the $150 in bonus bets. And there's a lot of lopsided kind of offerings at FanDuel.com. So again, FanDuel.com, never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, here we go. We are going to get into departures, which again, even though we were getting reports that this wasn't really going to happen, I was surprised by that and have been saying all along that I did think that this was going to happen, and that when it was reported that it wasn't, I was like, I'm shocked. Anyway, thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We have not been every day due to some personal reasons. I apologize for that. Doing my best to be out here for you as often as I can, and happy to be here with you today. But moving forward, just getting to the point here, the Giants' former general manager, Pete Putila, is gone. He goes to the Atlanta Braves to be an assistant GM. And so this was something I talked about at length. And the reason I didn't think Pete Putila was going to stick around was because he's highly regarded in the industry, and he achieved the GM role with the Giants, and then he was moved off of it. And I just didn't see him accepting a demotion from the team that gave him that position, and that he could probably get a better opportunity elsewhere. And pretty quickly, we kept hearing he's going to be reassigned, but that, that's kind of a fall. I think he would have had a place with the Giants, but I don't think he would have been fired, but they certainly were going to allow him to pursue other opportunities, apparently. And so he goes to Atlanta to become an assistant GM. And this is just the first of a few notable departures. And so this was one thing that I kind of worried about with Buster Posey coming in and just kind of being plopped into this role that is often earned through decades of experience working in a front office. It's atypical to go from the field to ownership to being the president of baseball operations. Like, it's kind of not just atypical. I don't know that we've ever, at least in modern times, seen anything like this. And one of my big questions about this was how others in front office positions would react to this. And one of my concerns was about GM candidates, and would a GM want to take on this unorthodox position, working. I'm not saying, like, people love Buster Posey, like, reputationally it couldn't be better, but like as president of baseball operations, it's a different deal, and we just don't know. It's very volatile. Like, we don't know what it's going to look like. And so anyway, for Putila to be like, they didn't consider him. Maybe they did consider him, but probably not. It seems like they just immediately went to Posey once they decided to fire Farhan Zaidi. Anyway, Putila's like, you know what? I'm going to pursue other opportunities. He goes to the Atlanta Braves. And then we just learned today, courtesy of multiple reporters who are at the GM meetings, which are taking place right now, that Michael Schwartz, who has been with the Giants since 2018 and was their director of baseball analytics, has left along with Pete Putila for the Atlanta Braves. So we're seeing a bit of an exodus here. And the question I have is, when will it stop? Like, is it just these two? Is it Schwartz and Putila? Like, these are some significant names here. The director of baseball analytics and your general manager were both invited back and left voluntarily. And also Justin Veely. And I know some people are doing cartwheels that Justin Veely is gone. Well, guess where he goes? Texas Rangers, where Donnie Ecker is the bench coach and offensive coordinator, and they hired Veely to be their hitting coach. Like, I don't know if there's another hitting coach. Obviously, Donnie Ecker is involved with being a hitting coach, but he's the offensive coordinator, whatever exactly that means. It encompasses, I know, both the majors and the minors. But Justin Veely, who was a holdover from these three hitting coaches the Giants initially brought in, Donnie Ecker, Justin Veely, and Dustin Lind. And then in their first couple of seasons, 2020, 60-game season, but still they hit well. In 2021, they hit very well, the Giants. Donnie Ecker leaves. A lot of speculation that Ecker leaving was like a big, huge, enormous loss, including speculation from me. Veely remained. And, Ecker, at one point, the Giants went to play the Rangers, and Ecker was interviewed, and he said, Veely's like the best in the business. And anyway, clearly Ecker meant it because he hires Veely away here from the Giants. Giants had invited him back. This is according to Andrew Baggarly. Baggarly said a few days ago, more changes are coming to the Giants coaching staff. Hitting coach Justin Veely appears headed to the Rangers, which was later verified that he was announced. And then Baggarly says, and assistant hitting coach Pedro Guerrero is interviewing for a position with the Miami Marlins. Both had another year on their contracts and had been invited back. So this is just something to, I don't know, I don't want to necessarily raise alarm about this, but you got four, I guess technically Pedro Guerrero hasn't left yet, but is interviewing with other positions despite being invited back. Veely, Putila, and Schwartz leaving despite being invited back. And, maybe the Giants were actually kind of soft firing them. And maybe, it sounds like when Baggarly says Veely was invited back, that they wanted him back. So those are positions they're going to have to fill. And it also kind of flies in the face of the argument that, the Giants hitting woes were the result of Ecker leaving and Veely kind of being the guy, because Ecker himself wants Veely to be the guy for him as the offensive coordinator. They're going to work together, but nonetheless, he could have chosen from a number of people, presumably, and he chose Veely. And so there you have it. Something to pay attention to for sure. So coming up later on this week, hopefully tomorrow, more from the GM meetings. The Giants, Buster Posey spoke about the what the team is hoping to accomplish in the offseason, at least a particular position that he pointed out, and much more. We've got top 50 free agent lists. I didn't even mention actually what the Giants' payroll is looking like now that the opt-out decisions have been made. Just to give you a quick rundown, it's looking like roughly $155 million if you account for all four of their arbitration eligible players. Yaz at $9.5 million, Wade at $4.7, Tyler Rogers at $5.5, Camilo Duvall at $4.6. And so these tender decisions are like 10 days away, and so that will affect this payroll number as well. So that's something to watch out for. But again, $155 million if those all get picked up and the estimates are accurate. But you could non-tender a Mike Yastrzemski, for example, and clear about $10 million of projected payroll and be at about $145 million. And they went into the 2024 season over $200 million. They were over, I think they were like $230 million from a luxury tax payroll perspective. So there's more to get into about the payroll, and we'll get to it later on this week. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much. So thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again, hopefully tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.